I'm Marcus Rivera, 45, and I spent the last 15 years of my life behind bars for a crime I didn't commit. When I walked out of those prison gates last month, expecting tears and embraces from my family, my mother's first words were, "Well, you must have done something to end up there." My sister nodded in agreement, while my brother checked his watch, eager to leave. What they didn't know was that I'd spent every day of those 15 years gathering evidence. And the real criminal they'd been protecting all along was standing right there with them. If you've ever been betrayed by those who should believe in you most, hit that like button and subscribe, because what happened next changed everything. 15 years ago, I had everything. At 30 years old, I was a senior financial advisor at Brennan & Associates, managing portfolios for some of the city's wealthiest families. My business card, heavy cardstock with raised gold lettering, represented years of hard work and late nights. I kept one in my wallet even through all those years in prison. A reminder of who I used to be. That night, in October 2009, started like any other. I'd worked late, reviewing investment strategies for the Hartman account. Richard Hartman was more than just a client. He'd become a mentor, someone who believed in my potential when I was just starting out. His house in Westfield Heights was a testament to old money, Georgian colonial, manicured lawns. The kind of place where bad things weren't supposed to happen. I'd left the office around 9:30, grabbing takeout from Chen's Garden, like I did every Thursday. The receipt would later become evidence. Time-stamped, 9:47 p.m., paid with my credit card. Security footage from the restaurant showed me waiting for my order, checking emails on my BlackBerry. Normal things. The last normal things I'd do for 15 years. The call came at 11:15 p.m. I was home, halfway through my Kung Pao chicken, watching the late news. My brother David's name flashed on my phone screen. That should have been my first warning. David never called that late. "Marcus, where are you?" His voice was strange, tight with something I couldn't identify. "Home. Why? Just stay there. Okay. Don't go anywhere." "David, what's going on?" "There's been an incident at the Hartman place. Cops are there." My stomach dropped. "Is Richard okay?" "I don't know. I just... I heard about it. Stay home." But I couldn't. Richard was more than a client. I drove to Westfield Heights, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The blue and red lights were visible from 3 blocks away, painting the perfect lawns in alternating colors. Police tape blocked the driveway. An officer stopped me at the perimeter. "I'm Marcus Rivera," I said. "Richard Hartman is my client." "Is he?" The officer's expression told me everything. Behind him, I could see crime scene technicians moving in and out of the house. Then Detective Morrison appeared, a man I'd later learn had a history with my brother, though I didn't know it then. "Mr. Rivera, we've been looking for you. I just found out. My brother called your brother." Morrison's eyes sharpened. "David Rivera." I nodded, confused by his interest. "He told me there'd been an incident." "And how did your brother know about this incident?" That question would haunt me. How did David know? The 911 call had only been placed at 10:45 p.m. The media hadn't picked it up yet. Even the neighbors were just learning about it. But somehow, David knew. "I need you to come with us," Morrison said. "Just to answer some questions." I went willingly. Why wouldn't I? I had nothing to hide. My alibi was solid. Restaurant receipt, security footage, text messages with times. I'd been nowhere near the Hartman house during the robbery that had gone wrong, leaving Richard dead and his safe emptied of nearly $2 million in bearer bonds and cash. But as I sat in that interrogation room, drinking bitter coffee and answering the same questions over and over, I watched my solid alibi crumble like wet sand. The security footage from Chen's Garden was mysteriously corrupted after 9:50 p.m. My credit card receipt could have been from any Thursday. The text messages I'd exchanged with a colleague somehow hadn't saved properly on the server. And then, there was David, my younger brother, sitting in the next room, telling the detectives how I'd been acting strangely lately, how I'd mentioned the Hartman house's security weaknesses, how I'd been having financial troubles. All lies, but delivered with such conviction that even I almost believed them. The courtroom artist captured me perfectly, hunched forward in the defendant's chair, my tie slightly askew, eyes fixed on a family that had already convicted me. That sketch would run in the papers for weeks, becoming the image everyone associated with the Hartman murder. In it, you can see my mother in the gallery, behind the prosecution, her mouth set in a grim line. David sits beside her, leaning forward as if eager to see justice done. Lisa, my sister, stares at her hands folded in her lap. The trial began 6 months after my arrest. 6 months of sitting in county jail, watching my savings drain into legal fees, believing that truth would prevail. My lawyer, Patterson, was competent but overwhelmed. The prosecution had resources, motivation, and most importantly, a narrative that made sense to 12 jurors who wanted to believe that financial advisors were all crooks anyway. Mr. Rivera had unique access to the victim's home. Assistant District Attorney Sharon Klein told the jury in her opening statement. He knew the security codes. He knew about the safe. He knew that Mr. Hartman kept bearer bonds, untraceable financial instruments worth millions. And on the night of October 15, 2009, Marcus Rivera used that knowledge to commit robbery and murder. The evidence was circumstantial, but damning when presented in sequence. My fingerprints in the house. Of course they were. I'd been there dozens of times for meetings. Knowledge of the security system. Naturally, Richard had asked my advice. When upgrading it, the financial motive they'd found I had $40,000 in student loans, a mortgage, credit card debt, normal debt for a 30-year-old professional, but the prosecution painted it as desperation. Then came the witnesses. First, the neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who'd initially told police she'd seen nothing unusual that night. By the time of trial, she clearly remembered seeing my car in the neighborhood around 10:30 p.m. I noticed because Mr. Rivera usually drives that blue BMW, she testified. It was parked near the corner, like someone didn't want it seen from the Hartman house. Patterson tried to shake her testimony. Mrs. Chen, in your initial statement to police, you said you went to bed at 9:30 p.m. that night. I must have gotten up for water and happened to look out your window. I often do. Neighborhood watch. But you didn't mention this in your first statement. I was confused, in shock. It came back to me later, after she'd had several conversations with David, though we wouldn't learn about those until years afterward. But it was David's testimony that truly buried me. My own brother took the stand on day 3, wearing the suit I'd helped him buy 4 job interviews. He couldn't meet my eyes as he raised his right hand and swore to tell the truth. Marcus had been acting different, David told the court. Stressed, he mentioned the Hartman account a lot, how much money was just sitting there. He even told me once that Richard kept cash and bonds in a safe, that it was stupid not to use a bank. When did he tell you this? Klein asked. About a month before, before it happened. We were having drinks after work. I wanted to scream. We hadn't had drinks in months. David had been avoiding me, always broke, always asking for loans I couldn't give. But I sat silent, my lawyer's hand on my arm, watching my brother construct a careful narrative of my guilt. Did Marcus ever mention financial troubles to you? David nodded, finally glancing my way. He was stressed about money. The economy was bad. Clients were pulling out. He mentioned that his department might have layoffs. Another lie. Brennan and Associates was thriving. I was on track for a promotion. But the jury didn't know that. They saw a desperate man with means, motive, and opportunity. The prosecution's closing argument was a masterpiece of inference and implication. Klein stood before the jury, holding up a photo of Richard Hartman. This man trusted Marcus Rivera, invited him into his home, shared his financial secrets, and Marcus Rivera repaid that trust with violence. The defense wants you to believe this is all coincidence. That Mr. Rivera's knowledge of the house, the safe, the bonds, all coincidence. That the witness, seeing his car, mistaken. That his own brother's testimony about his financial stress and strange behavior. What? A family vendetta. Ladies and gentlemen, sometimes the simplest explanation is the truth. Marcus Rivera killed Richard Hartman for money. Don't let him get away with it. Patterson did his best in closing. He pointed out the gaps, the lack of physical evidence placing me at the scene during the murder, the mysteriously corrupted security footage from the restaurant. But doubt isn't innocence, and the jury wanted someone to blame for a good man's death. They deliberated for 2 days. 2 days where I actually hoped, where I believed 12 strangers would see through the lies. When they filed back in, not one would look at me. We, the jury, find the defendant, Marcus Rivera, guilty of murder in the 1st degree. The sound my mother made wasn't quite a sob, more like vindication, as if she'd known all along that I was capable of this. As the bailiffs prepared to take me away, I turned to look at my family one last time. Lisa was crying, but they seemed like tears of shame, not sorrow. My mother sat rigid, already distancing herself from her criminal son. But David looked relieved. And in that moment, even though I didn't understand why. I knew my brother had done more than just testify against me. He'd orchestrated this entire tragedy. The judge sentenced me to 15 to 25 years. As they led me out in shackles, I heard David telling our mother he'd take care of everything, not to worry. The courtroom sketch artist was drawing, again, capturing the moment the convicted murderer was led away. But he missed the most important detail, the satisfied smile that flickered across my brother's face when he thought no one was looking. State Correctional Facility Rockbridge was nothing like the movies. No dramatic music, no slow-motion walks through the yard. Just the mechanical grind of gates closing, the constant noise of 3,000 men living in cages, and the realization that this concrete box would be my world for the next 15 years. Maybe more. The letter from my mother arrived 3 weeks into my sentence. I recognized her handwriting on the envelope, the same careful cursive that had signed permission, slips and birthday cards. My hands shook as I opened it in my cell, desperate for words of comfort, of belief in my innocence. Marcus, it began. Not dear Marcus, or my son, just my name, like a statement of fact. I've spent weeks trying to understand how I failed you, where I went wrong in raising you. Your father always said you were too ambitious, too hungry for things beyond your reach. I didn't want to believe it. David told me about the debts, about the pressure you were under. I wish you had come to me instead of doing this terrible thing. Mr. Hartman was a good man. His wife is destroyed. Do you understand what you've taken? From her, from all of us. I cannot visit you. I cannot pretend to support what you've done. Perhaps prison will give you time to reflect on your choices and find God's forgiveness, even if I cannot offer mine. Your brother is helping me with the house payments since I can no longer hold my head up at church or the grocery store. Everyone knows what you did. Please don't write to me. I need time to grieve the son I thought I knew. She signed it Helen Rivera. Not mum or mother, just her name, as if I were a stranger. I read it 17 times that first day, each word cutting deeper than the last. By the evening count, I'd memorized every line. The paper was soft from folding and unfolding, stained with tears I didn't remember shedding. Rough news from home. The voice belonged to Jerry Dawson, my cellmate, a 60-year-old lifer with horn-rimmed glasses and a mind sharp as any lawyer's. He'd been down 23 years for a murder he insisted he didn't commit. I'd thought he was just another con with a story until I realized everyone in Rockbridge claimed innocence except Jerry. He admitted guilt freely to the wrong crime. My mother, I said, handing him the letter. She thinks I did it. Jerry read it slowly, his expression darkening. First time a mistake, he said finally. Expecting family to stand by you. Half the men in here got the same letter their first month. The other half never got letters at all. My own mother doesn't matter if she's your mother or Mother Teresa. People outside need someone to blame. Makes them feel safe, knowing the bad guy's locked up. Your family. They need it more than strangers. Otherwise, they got to face that the system screwed up, that it could happen to them. He handed the letter back. You want some advice? Stop waiting for them to believe you. Start believing in yourself. You say you're innocent. I am. Then prove it. Not to them, they made up their minds. Prove it to the only person who matters now, you. That night, I made my first request to the prison library for my case files. The request was denied. I made another, then another. It took 6 weeks before they finally granted access. And what I found was pathetic public defender notes, basic court transcripts, nothing that would help. But it was a start. Jerry became my guide to prison survival. Not the violent kind. Rockbridge's financial crimes wing was relatively calm. But the mental kind. How to structure your days so they didn't blur together. How to find purpose in a purposeless place. And most importantly, how to study law. Every prison's got jailhouse lawyers, he explained during yard time. Most are idiots who think watching Law and Order makes them Clarence Darrow. But some actually know their stuff. You want to survive in here with your mind intact. Become useful. Learn something. I started with basic legal texts, struggling through procedural guides and case law. Jerry would quiz me during meals, correcting my misunderstandings with the patience of a professor. Other inmates began to notice, asking for help with their appeals, offering commissary items in exchange for document review. But even as I built this new routine, my mother's words haunted me. David was paying her house payments. David, who'd been unemployed and in debt just months before my arrest. David, who somehow knew about the murder before the media. David, who'd testified against me with such convincing detail. The pieces were there. scattered like breadcrumbs in a dark forest. I just didn't know how to follow the trail. Not yet. 6 months into my sentence, I tried calling home. Lisa answered on the third ring. "It's Marcus," I said. The line went dead. I called back. No answer. I tried David's number next, got his voicemail. "Hey brother, it's me. Just wanted to." The mechanical voice cut in. "This mailbox is full." That's when I understood. I wasn't just imprisoned by walls and bars. I'd been erased from my family's life. Deleted like a typo in their perfect story. The son, the brother who'd embarrassed them, who'd brought shame to the Rivera name. But Jerry was right. I couldn't wait for them to believe me. I had to believe in myself. Had to find the truth buried under all those convenient lies. So I kept studying, kept requesting files, kept building my case. Because somewhere in those documents, in the testimony and evidence, was the key to my freedom. I just had to survive long enough to find it. The police timeline that changed everything was hidden in box 3 of 7, sandwiched between witness statements and forensic reports. 2 years into my sentence, I'd finally gotten access to the complete case files through a sympathetic paralegal, working for the Innocence Project. She couldn't take my case, to many others with DNA evidence waiting, but she'd pulled strings to get me the documents. I spread the papers across the metal table in the law library, my heart racing as I recognized the inconsistency I'd been searching for. According to the official timeline, the 911 call reporting Richard's murder came in at 10:47 p.m. Police arrived at 10:58 p.m. The medical examiner estimated time of death between 10:15 and 10:45 p.m. But David had called me at 11:15 p.m. already, knowing about the incident at the Hartman place. 20 minutes. That's all. But those 20 minutes meant David knew about the murder before anyone should have. Before the media, before the neighborhood gossip network, before anyone except the killer and the police. I stared at the timeline until my eyes burned, then cross-referenced it with my phone records from that night. There it was, in black and white, incoming call from David Rivera. Duration 2:34. Timestamp, 11:15 p.m. My hands trembled as I made notes, trying to contain my excitement. This was the first real evidence that something was wrong with the official story. Find something. Jerry peered over my shoulder, adjusting his glasses. "My brother knew," I said. "He knew about the murder before it was public." Jerry was quiet. For a moment, could be explained away. Maybe he heard it from a cop friend, scanner, something like that. But I was already digging deeper, pulling out witness statements. And that's when I found the second piece. Mrs. Patricia Dalton, Richards, neighbor 2 houses down, had given a statement saying she'd seen David's car in the neighborhood that afternoon. White Honda Civic, around 4 p.m., her statement read. I noticed because he was parked in front of the Hartman place for about 20 minutes. Thought it was odd because Richard's car wasn't in the driveway. David drove a white Civic, and according to his trial testimony, he'd never been to the Hartman house. Ever. The math was starting to add up in the worst possible way. I pulled out David's financial records, subpoenaed during my trial but never thoroughly examined. My lawyer had been focused on my finances, not my brother's. But there it was. 3 cash deposits in the month after Richard's murder. $9,500, $9,000, and $8,500. All just under the $10,000 federal reporting requirement, $20,000-$7,000. Cash, from a brother who'd been begging me for rent. Money just weeks before. Jesus, Jerry whistled low. Your brother set me up. The words tasted like ashes. He killed Richard and set me up. But knowing it and proving it were different things. I needed more. I pulled out the witness statements, focusing on Mrs. Chen, the neighbor who'd changed her story about seeing my car. In her original statement, taken the night of the murder, she'd been certain. I went to bed at 9:30 p.m., took my sleeping pills, didn't hear or see anything until the police sirens woke me. But by the trial, she remembered seeing my BMW at 10:30 p.m. What had changed? I found it in the supplemental reports. 3 weeks after the murder, Detective Morrison had re-interviewed Mrs. Chen. Present at that interview, David Rivera, who'd volunteered to help police with community relations since he knew the neighborhood. My helpful brother, making sure witnesses remembered the right details. The security footage from Chen's garden, the restaurant where I'd picked up dinner, had been corrupted after 9:50 p.m. But the forensic report showed something interesting. The corruption wasn't random. Someone had deliberately overrode those specific time segments. Someone with knowledge of the system. I remembered David bragging about his new job a few years back, installing security systems for local businesses, including, I realized with growing horror, Chen's Garden. Every thread led back to him. The gambling debts I'd refused to cover. Multiple witnesses mentioned David owing money to serious people. His sudden financial windfall after my conviction. His presence, at key moments, influencing witnesses, shaping the narrative. You need to be careful, Jerry warned as I compiled my notes. You go after family from in here, you better have ironclad proof. And even then, he was right. I had pieces, but not enough. I needed the murder weapon, never found. I needed David's connection to the stolen bearer bonds untraceable by design. I needed something concrete, undeniable. That's when I remembered the victim. Richard Hartman hadn't just been wealthy, he'd been connected. Old money, old grudges, old secrets. If David had targeted him specifically, there had to be a reason beyond the safe full of bonds. I wrote to Richard's widow that night. A careful letter, respectful, asking only for information about anyone Richard might have had financial dealings with. I didn't mention David. I didn't proclaim my innocence. I just asked for help understanding why someone would have targeted her husband. The response came 3 weeks later. Margaret Hartman's handwriting was shaky but clear. Mr. Rivera, I don't know why I'm writing to you. Perhaps because something has always bothered me about that night. Richard did have enemies, business rivals, people he'd outmaneuvered in deals. But there was one name he mentioned in the weeks before he died. Someone who owed him money and was getting desperate. He said the man was dangerous, unstable. The name was David Rivera. I assumed it was a coincidence, that it wasn't related to you. But now I wonder, was David Rivera your brother? I sat in my cell that night, Margaret's letter in my hands, and felt the truth crystallizing around me like ice. David hadn't just framed me. He'd murdered his creditor and used his knowledge of my life, my work, my trust, to build the perfect case against me. My own brother had stolen 15 years of my life to save his own skin. The pattern was clear now. All I needed was proof that would stand up in court. And I had 13 more years to find it. The stack of unsent letters grew thick enough to use as a pillow, though I kept them in a box beneath my bunk. Each one represented another attempt to reach my family, another failure to break through their wall of certainty about my guilt. By year 3, I'd written 47 letters. None of them made it past the prison mailroom. The first ones were desperate, rambling things full of proclamations of innocence and pleas for belief. I'd torn those up myself, recognizing the cliché even as I wrote it. Every prisoner proclaims innocence. Every family receives those letters. They all sound the same. So I tried a different approach. Facts, evidence, careful explanations of the timeline discrepancies. David's presence in the neighborhood, the mysterious cash deposits. I wrote like I was preparing a legal brief, keeping emotion out of it, letting the facts speak for themselves. Dear Mom, one began. I've discovered that David was at the Hartman house the day of the murder. A neighbor saw his car. He never mentioned this to police. Don't you find that strange? That letter came back marked, returned to sender in my mother's handwriting. I tried Lisa next. My sister had always been the reasonable one, the mediator in family arguments. Surely she'd at least read what I had to say. Lisa, I know you don't want to hear from me, but please, just look at these documents. David lied on the witness stand. I can prove it. All I need is for someone to listen. That letter came back unopened, refused, stamped across it in red ink. The news of Lisa's wedding reached me through Jerry, who had a cousin who lived in my old neighborhood. Spring of 2012, a beautiful ceremony at St. Michael's, the same church where we'd been baptized. David gave her away. In the pictures Jerry's cousin sent, my family looked complete, happy even, like I'd never existed. I wrote a letter that night. Not to send, but to exercise the pain. Dear Lisa, I heard you got married. I hope he's good to you. I hope he makes you laugh like Kevin used to in high school. I hope your children never know what it's like to be erased by the people who should love them most. I would have walked you down that aisle. I would have danced with you to butterfly kisses like we always joked about. I would have been there. But I guess David fills that role now. David fills all my roles. I wonder if that was part of his plan to Mother's 70th birthday passed with similar silence. I tracked down a card in the prison commissary, the kind with watercolor flowers and generic sentiment. Inside, I wrote simply, Happy birthday, Mom. I think of you every day. Your son, Marcus. I gave it to a guard to mail, bypassing the usual channels. It never came back, but I never heard anything either. Maybe she threw it away. Maybe David intercepted it. Maybe it didn't matter anymore. The successful businessman David had become fascinated me in the worst way. Jerry's cousin sent newspaper clippings. David Rivera, entrepreneur, opening his third security consultation firm. David Rivera, donating to the Police Benevolent Association. David Rivera, speaking at business forums about overcoming family tragedy. My brother's conviction taught me that we can't always save the people we love, he'd told one reporter. But we can learn from their mistakes and build something positive from the ashes. The ashes, like I was already dead. I wrote him one letter, just one. Not asking for help or proclaiming innocence. Just questions. David, how did you know about the murder before the police announced it? Why were you at Richard's house that afternoon? Where did the $27,000 come from? Your brother, Marcus. I kept a copy but never sent the original. What was the point? David had crafted his story too carefully to let my questions unravel it. He'd built his success on my destruction, and nothing I could say from a prison cell would change that. The letters I didn't write hurt worse than the ones I did. The explanation to my nephew and niece, who would grow up knowing only Uncle David. The plea to my mother's pastor to visit her, to remind her that Christianity meant forgiveness. The warning to Richard Hartman's widow that her husband's real killer was free, building a security empire on blood money. Instead, I channeled everything into legal documents, appeals, motions, requests for evidence review. These letters couldn't be refused or returned. They demanded answers, even if those answers were usually motion denied. One night, after another failed appeal, I sat with my box of unsent letters and realized what they really were. A one-sided conversation with ghosts. The family who'd refused these letters didn't exist anymore. They'd been replaced by strangers who looked like people I'd loved, who shared their names and faces but not their hearts. You still writing those letters? Jerry asked, seeing me with pen and paper again. Not to them, I said. To myself. Reminders of why I keep fighting, because that's what the letters had become. Not attempts at communication but declarations of persistence. Each one ended the same way. The truth will come out. David will face justice. I will be free. Mantras written in blue ink on prison stationery, a paper trail of hope that somehow, despite everything, refused to die. The law books in Rockbridge's library were outdated, water-damaged, and missing pages. But they became my salvation. Jerry started with the basics. Criminal Procedure by Lefebvre, a brick of a book that explained how the system was supposed to work. The gap between theory and my reality was vast enough to drive a truck through. First rule of prison law, Jerry explained during one of our study sessions, is that the law doesn't give a damn about you being innocent. It cares about procedure. You find where they screwed up the procedure, you got a shot. You keep screaming, you're innocent without the procedural hook. You're just another con with a story. So I learned procedure. Motion practice, habeas corpus. Brady violations. The arcane language of justice that had nothing to do with truth and everything to do with rules. Jerry quizzed me relentlessly, turning mealtimes into law school. What's the standard for ineffective assistance of counsel? Strickland v. Washington, 2 prongs. Deficient performance and prejudice to the defense. Good. Now apply it to your case. That was harder. Patterson hadn't been brilliant, but he hadn't been incompetent either. He'd just been outgunned, working with the facts he had, not the ones hidden in David's lies. 6 months into my legal education, I filed my first motion pro se representing myself. A simple request for additional discovery, specifically focusing on the corrupted security footage from Chent's garden. The motion was denied, but the exercise taught me how to write in the peculiar syntax courts expected. Other inmates started noticing. Marcus Rivera, the financial advisor turned jailhouse lawyer. They came with appeals, sentence modifications, requests for new trials. I charged in commissary goods, ramen noodles for basic forms, honey buns for document review, real coffee for actual writing. It wasn't about the payment. It was about staying sharp, practicing on other cases while building my own. That's how I met Tommy Chen, no relation to the restaurant. Bank fraud case, similar to mine in that the evidence was all circumstantial. Reading his files, I spotted something the court had missed. The prosecution's key document had a metadata timestamp 2 days after they claimed it was created. A small thing, but enough for an appeal. You find this kind of detail in my case, I'll owe you forever, Tommy said. I was already finding details, just not enough to matter. The corrupted security footage bothered me most. Digital forensics weren't my specialty. But I understood enough to know that selective corruption, specific timestamps, being overwritten while the rest of the file remained intact, suggested deliberate tampering. Jerry helped me file a motion for expert examination of the footage. Long shot, he warned. Courts don't like spending money on closed cases. But sometimes long shots pay off. The motion landed on the desk of Judge Patricia Stevenson, who'd recently attended a conference on wrongful convictions. She granted a limited examination. The expert's report came back 2 months later. The corruption pattern was consistent. With deliberate overwriting using administrative access to the security system, someone with system knowledge had specifically destroyed those crucial minutes that would have shown me at the restaurant during the murder. It wasn't proof David had done it, but it was the first crack in the prosecution's case. I filed an appeal. Based on this new evidence, denied filed for reconsideration. Denied. But each denial came with comments, suggestions, breadcrumbs leading to the next filing. "You're getting close to something," Jerry observed one evening. "They don't usually write this much on denials, unless they're worried." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Correctional Officer Martinez had been watching me work in the library, seeing how I helped other inmates with their cases. One day, he lingered after count. "My brother went down for murder in '03, he said quietly. 15 to life. Swore he was innocent. We didn't believe him until the real killer confessed 5 years later. Did he get out? Eventually. Took 3 more years, even with the confession. System doesn't like admitting mistakes." He paused, glancing around. "You know, sometimes evidence gets misfiled. Ends up in the wrong boxes. Happens more than you'd think with old cases." I understood. Original evidence from my case was scheduled for destruction, standard procedure after appeals were exhausted. But if some of it was misfiled, it might survive. Martinez couldn't directly help, but he could point me in the right direction. I spent the next weeks researching evidence preservation laws, filing requests with every agency that might have retained materials. Most came back empty, but the state crime lab still had the original security footage hardware from Chen's garden, sitting in an evidence locker. "Forgotten." "Holy shit," Jerry said when I showed him the inventory confirmation. The actual server drive, with the original files. Before the corruption. If David tampered with it, there might be traces. Access logs. Something. I filed for independent examination of the hardware. This time, instead of going through normal channels, I copied the Innocence Project, the ACLU. 3 journalism schools with wrongful conviction programs. Create enough noise, Jerry taught me, and sometimes the system responds just to shut you up. 6 weeks later, Judge Stevenson ordered the examination. It would take months to happen, years maybe, but it was hope. Real, tangible hope. "You know what you are now?" Jerry asked as we celebrated with contraband cigarettes on the yard. "What?" "Dangerous. A con who knows the law, has evidence, and won't quit. That's the kind that makes the system nervous." He was right. The next week, I was transferred to a different cell block. "Administrative convenience," they said. But Martinez caught my eye as they moved me. A slight nod confirming what I suspected. Someone was paying attention. Someone wanted me separated from Jerry, from the library, from my work. But they'd taught me too much already. I knew the law now, knew my rights, knew how to fight from inside a cage. The transfer was just another obstacle, and I'd gotten good at those. That night, in my new cell, I started writing briefs from memory, preparing for a battle that would take years more to unfold. But I had time. And now, I had weapons. The parole board met in a conference room that smelled like old coffee and disappointment. 10 years into my sentence, I sat before them in my best prison blues, hands folded, knowing the outcome before anyone spoke. The denial letter was probably already typed, waiting only for signatures. "Mr. Rivera," the board chair began, adjusting her reading glasses. "You're here for your first parole eligibility hearing. I see you've maintained a clean disciplinary record, completed numerous educational programs, and provided legal assistance to fellow inmates." "Yes, ma'am." "However," she continued, and that single word carried the weight of everything that would follow, "we have some concerns. Specifically, letters from your family members opposing your release." She held up the papers like evidence. 3 letters, 3 signatures I knew by heart. My mother's careful cursive, Lisa's looping style, David's sharp slashes. "Would you like me to read them into the record?" "No," I said quietly. "I can guess what they say." But she read them anyway. "Policy, probably." or maybe cruelty, dressed as procedure. From Helen Rivera, the defendant's mother, she began, "My son has shown no remorse for his crime. He continues to maintain his innocence, despite overwhelming evidence. He has sent numerous letters attempting to blame others, including his own brother, who testified truthfully at trial. I fear for our safety if he is released. A mother knows her children, and I know Marcus is exactly where he belongs." Each word was a nail. I kept my face neutral, a skill learned through a decade of disappointments. From Lisa Morrison, Anna E. Rivera, the defendant's sister, "Marcus destroyed our family with his actions. My children don't know their uncle exists, and I intend to keep it that way. He murdered a good man for money and has spent 10 years crafting elaborate conspiracies rather than accepting responsibility. He is manipulative and dangerous. Please do not release him, Morrison." She'd taken her husband's name, erasing even that connection to me. From David Rivera, the defendant's brother, "I testified against my brother because it was the right thing to do, though it broke my heart. In the years since, he has fixated on me as the cause of his troubles, making wild accusations and threats through intermediaries. I've had to increase security at my businesses due to his harassment from prison." Marcus refuses to acknowledge his guilt, which shows he hasn't been rehabilitated. "For the safety of our family and community, he should serve his full sentence." Threats through intermediaries. Harassment. David had turned my search for truth into evidence of dangerous obsession. Mr. Rivera, another board member, spoke. "You've maintained your innocence throughout your incarceration. Is that still your position?" The question every innocent prisoner faces. Admit guilt and show remorse. Maybe get released. Maintain innocence and stay buried. The system's final cruelty, forcing you to choose between freedom and truth. "I am innocent," I said clearly. "I've discovered evidence that my brother David," Mr. Rivera, the chair, interrupted. "This board isn't here to relitigate your case. We're here to assess your readiness for release. Your continued refusal to accept responsibility, combined with what appears to be an unhealthy fixation on your brother, suggests you haven't undergone the necessary rehabilitation. With respect, how can I be rehabilitated for something I didn't do?" That's exactly the problem, Mr. Rivera. Until you can acknowledge your actions and their impact on the victims, including your family, you present an ongoing risk to public safety. The rest was formality. Questions about my prison programs, completed with excellence. My release plans, detailed and realistic. My support system, non-existent. They went through the motions, but the decision was made the moment they'd read my family's letters. "Parole is denied," the chair announced. "You may reapply in 3 years. We strongly encourage you to participate in victim impact programs and to consider accepting responsibility for your actions." As the guards led me back to my cell, I thought about David's letter. Every word calculated to keep me inside while painting himself as the victim. The brother forced to testify. The successful businessman threatened by a delusional convict. He'd even mentioned increasing security, laying groundwork in case I ever got close to the truth. Martinez found me that evening, saw the defeat in my posture, denied family letters, said I'm dangerous, obsessed with David, refusing to accept guilt. He cursed under his breath. "Your brother's good, real good." He claimed I'd been harassing him through intermediaries, making threats, setting up a defense. "If you ever get out, try to investigate. He can claim you're stalking him. Get a restraining order, maybe even new charges." I hadn't considered that angle. David wasn't just keeping me in prison. He was preparing for the possibility I might get out. Every move calculated, every base covered. "What do I do?" Martinez was quiet for a moment. "You keep going, but smarter. No more direct accusations against David in official proceedings. Build your case quietly. And when you get out, because you will get out, you'll be ready." That night, I lay in my bunk thinking about my mother's words. A mother knows her children. Did she really believe that? Or had David's performance been so perfect that she'd rewritten her memories, turned me into the monster he needed me to be? 3 years, until the next hearing. 3 more years to find proof so undeniable that even a parole board couldn't ignore it. 3 more years while David solidified his empire, built on my bones. But Martinez was right. I'd learned patience in prison, learned strategy. David thought he'd won, thought his letters would keep me caged forever. He didn't understand that every word he'd written was evidence. Every lie, every manipulation, every calculated phrase. I pulled out my legal pad and started writing. Not a letter this time, a timeline. David's actions, his words, His gradual transformation from struggling brother to successful businessman. Somewhere in that transformation was the final piece of evidence I needed. I had 3 years to find it. And when I did, when I finally walked out of these gates, David would learn that prison hadn't broken me. It had forged me into his worst nightmare, a patient enemy with nothing left to lose. Martinez's badge number was 7392. I memorized it the day he first stopped by my new cell, ostensibly for a routine check, but really to slip me a note. Keep fighting. Some of us see what's happening. The transfer had separated me from Jerry and the main library, but Martinez made sure I still had access to legal materials. Books would appear on my bunk after count. Photocopies of relevant cases would be tucked into my commissary orders. Never anything traceable, but enough to keep my research going. 3 months into the new arrangement, Martinez finally told me his story during a quiet night shift. My brother Eduardo was a good kid, he said, leaning against the bars. Straight, a student, scholarship to state. Then one night, wrong place, wrong time. Convenience store robbery gone bad. Witness ID'd him as the shooter, but he wasn't. Was at a study group. 5 people confirmed it. Didn't matter. The witness was certain, and Eduardo was Latino in a white neighborhood. Jury took 2 hours. I understood that bitterness. The system wasn't designed to find truth. It was designed to close cases. What changed? Real killer got arrested for another murder. Bragged about the convenience store job to his cellmate. Took 3 years and 2 lawyers to get Eduardo out. Even with the confession, Martinez's jaw tightened. 3 years after we knew he was innocent. That's what your brother's counting on. That even if you find proof, the system will drag its feet until you give up or die. You know about David. I know patterns. Saw his name on visitor logs at the courthouse during your trial. Saw him talking to witnesses. Saw him get real friendly with Detective Morrison. He pulled out a small notebook. Been keeping track of interesting things. Thought you might want to see. The notebook was a revelation. Martinez had documented David's connections throughout the system. Morrison, who'd led my investigation, had gotten a commendation and promotion 6 months after my conviction. The prosecutor, Klein, had received campaign contributions from 3 security firms, all owned by shell companies that traced back to David. Even the judge had a connection. His son worked for one of David's companies. Jesus, I breathed. This is ... double quotes not enough. Martinez finished. It's suspicious, but not illegal. Your brother's smart. Nothing direct, nothing provable, but it shows he's got reach. Why are you helping me? Martinez was quiet for a moment. Because I couldn't help Eduardo when it mattered. Because I see you in that library, helping guys who don't have anyone else. Because sometimes the only way to fix a broken system is from inside. He started bringing more than just legal materials. Newspaper clippings about David's businesses. Public records showing property transfers. Financial filings that painted a picture of rapid expansion funded by mysterious investors. Look at this. Martinez showed me one night. Your brother bought a warehouse 6 months after your conviction. Cash purchase, $450,000. The seller, a company owned by Richard Hartman's business partner. You think they were in on it together, or your brother used the stolen bonds to buy his way into legitimate business. Either way, it's a connection worth exploring. We developed a system. Martinez would research on the outside. I'd analyze on the inside. He couldn't access official databases without leaving traces, but public records, newspaper archives, corporate filings, all fair game. Slowly, we built a financial map of David's empire. Each connection, another thread in the web. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Martinez's cousin worked for the company that had installed Chune's Gardens security system, the same company David had worked 4 years ago. Over beers, the cousin mentioned how they'd upgraded their entire system in 2010. Right after that murder case, where the footage got corrupted. Said it was weird, Martinez reported. The old system was fine, but the owner insisted on replacing everything. Paid cash, top-of-the-line setup. Someone paid them to destroy evidence, or to ensure no one could prove the tampering. But here's the interesting part. They kept the old system in storage. Company policy to retain hardware for 5 years. It's been 12, but my cousin says they never clean out the warehouse. My heart raced. The original hardware might still exist, gathering dust in a warehouse. Hardware that might contain logs, showing who accessed the system the night of the murder. Can your cousin already asked? He can't risk his job, but he told me which warehouse, which section. if someone were to request it through proper legal channels. I drafted the motion that night, citing new evidence, location, and requesting preservation before destruction. But I knew it would take more than paperwork. We needed media attention, public pressure. Martinez had a contact at the local paper, a reporter who'd covered wrongful convictions. She's interested, he told me. Wants to see what you've got. I spent 2 weeks preparing a package timeline, discrepancies, David's financial gains, the corrupted footage, witness inconsistencies. Martinez smuggled it out, piece by piece, mailing it from different locations to avoid detection. The article ran 3 weeks later. Questions persist. In 2009. Hartman murder. Is the wrong man in prison? It wasn't front page, but it was enough. The story mentioned the destroyed evidence, the timeline problems, the fact that David Rivera had profited significantly after his brother's conviction. David's response was swift. The next day a lawyer visited me. Not mine, David's. Mr. Rivera, the lawyer said, sitting across from me in the visiting room. Your brother is concerned about these false allegations being spread by the media. He's prepared to take legal action for defamation. Truth is a defense against defamation, I replied. Truth requires proof. You have theories, speculation. My client has built a successful business, contributes to the community. These baseless attacks tell David the first no about the warehouse purchase. I know about Morrison. I know about the $27,000. The lawyer's expression didn't change, but his pen stopped moving. My client has no idea what you're referring to. Then he has nothing to worry about. After the lawyer left, Martinez found me in the yard. You rattled him. Word is David's been making calls, trying to find out who's talking to reporters. Good. Let him sweat. But David wasn't just sweating. He was acting. 2 weeks later, Martinez was transferred to night shift, limiting our contact. The reporter received a cease and desist letter. The warehouse with the old security hardware suffered a convenient fire, destroying years of stored equipment. He's scared, Martinez managed to tell me during a brief encounter. Scared people make mistakes. He was right. In his rush to cover tracks, David had gotten sloppy. The warehouse fire was too convenient, too targeted. Insurance investigators started asking questions. The paper trail led back to a security consultation David's company had done just days before the fire. Arson investigation, Martinez whispered during count. They're looking at your brother. It wasn't enough to free me. Not yet. But it was enough to keep hope alive. David had spent years building his perfect crime, his perfect life on my destruction. But perfection is fragile. One crack, one mistake, and the whole structure could crumble. I had time. David had everything to lose. And thanks to an unexpected ally with his own demons of justice denied, I finally had a fighting chance. The attack came on a Tuesday evening in the shower block. 3 men, transfers from maximum security who shouldn't have been anywhere near the financial crimes wing. Professional, quick, brutal. If Martinez hadn't been making his rounds early, if another inmate hadn't screamed for help, the medical records would have listed cause of death instead of injuries sustained. I woke up in the prison infirmary 3 days later. Ribs screaming, vision blurry from the concussion. Martinez sat in a chair beside the bed, against all protocols. Don't try to talk, he said. Jaws wired. 3 broken ribs, concussion, internal bleeding. You're lucky, lucky. I tried to laugh, but pain shot through my chest. The men who did this, Martinez continued, voice low, they've been transferred back to Max. But Marcus, they were paid. Guard overheard one bragging about the commissary money they'd gotten for handling a problem. I knew who'd paid them. The same person who'd stolen 15 years of my life wouldn't hesitate to steal the rest. David had escalated from framing me to trying to kill me. The doctor, a tired-looking woman named Patel, checked my chart. You're stable, but recovery will take weeks, maybe months. You need to be careful, Mr. Rivera. Next time. There wouldn't be a next time. As I lay in that narrow infirmary bed, something fundamental shifted inside me. For 10 years, I'd been fighting to prove my innocence, believing that truth and justice would prevail. I'd maintained hope that someday my family would see David for what he was. That hope died with the taste of blood in my mouth and the wheeze of broken ribs. If David wanted me dead, it meant I was close to something, close enough to scare him into attempted murder. But it also meant I couldn't wait for the system anymore. Couldn't file motions and hope for justice. I had to survive, get out, and take David down myself. There's something else, Martinez said. Once the doctor left, that reporter, Sarah Chen. She's been digging, despite the cease and desist. Found something interesting about the night Richard Hartman died. He pulled out a folded newspaper clipping. Traffic camera caught David's car 4 blocks from the Hartman house at 9:45 p.m., heading away from the scene, 30 minutes before the murder. But that means ... he was there, at the house, before Richard died, and if he was leaving at 9:45, Martinez let the implication hang. David had been in the house with Richard, had probably shared a drink, talked business, then left before returning later to kill him. Or having someone else do it while he established an alibi elsewhere. Either way, it was the first concrete evidence, placing David at the scene. We need to, I started, but Martinez shook his head. You need to heal, and be smart. David just showed his hand. He's scared enough to try to kill you. That means we're close. The weeks in the infirmary gave me time to think, to plan. Physical therapy was agony, but I pushed through it with single-minded determination. Each painful step was one closer to freedom. Each breathing exercise expanded lungs that would need strength for what came next. I also made a decision. No more letters to family. No more hoping for reconciliation. They'd chosen their side, believed David's lies so completely, they'd help keep me in prison. When I got out, and I would get out, they'd be obstacles, not allies. You're different, Jerry observed, when I finally returned to general population. He'd been transferred back to my block, a small mercy in the chaos. Clearer, I said. I know what needs to be done. And what's that? Survive. Get out. End this. Jerry studied me with those sharp eyes. Your brother tried to have you killed. You know that, right? I know. And you're not going to do anything stupid when you get out. I chose my words carefully. I'm going to reveal the truth. Every bit of it. David's going to face justice. Legal justice. The only kind that matters. But we both knew there were different kinds of justice. The kind that came from courts and judges, and the kind that came from a man who'd lost everything, confronting the brother who'd taken it all. I spent the remaining months of recovery planning, not for revenge, that was David's game, not mine, but for exposure. When I got out, I'd have one chance to prove David's guilt before he could silence me permanently. One shot at redemption. Martinez helped me hide copies of everything. Documents, timelines, evidence, multiple caches in places David would never think to look. If something happened to me, the truth would still come out. 5 more years until mandatory release. Martinez reminded me one night. You can make it. 5 years. David had tried to kill me, rather than risk 5 more years. That told me everything I needed to know about how vulnerable he felt. His empire, built on my destruction, was more fragile than it appeared. I touched the scar on my ribs, a permanent reminder of how far my brother would go. But scars were just evidence of survival. And I'd gotten very good at surviving. 5 years, I agreed. David won't see me coming, because the Marcus Rivera, who'd walked into prison, trusting, hopeful, believing in family, was gone. The attack had killed him, as surely as if those men had succeeded. What remained was someone harder, smarter, and infinitely more dangerous. To David's carefully constructed life, that my brother had created his own worst enemy. He just didn't know it yet. The smartphone looked like something from science fiction. Officer Chen, no relation to the restaurant or the reporter, handed it to me during my pre-release orientation. Watching as I turned it over in my hands, like an artifact from another world. It's a basic model, she explained, mistaking my wonder for disappointment. But it'll help you adjust. Everyone has one now. Everyone. When I'd gone to prison, I'd had a BlackBerry that I thought was cutting it. Now this slim device could apparently do everything. Calls, internet, cameras, apps. Apps, a word that meant nothing in 2009, and everything in 2024. You'll need to set up accounts. Chen continued. Email, social media. Most jobs require online applications now. Banking's mostly digital, even grocery shopping. Each revelation was another reminder of how much time David had stolen. 15 years of technological revolution that had passed me by, but as Chen demonstrated basic functions, swiping, tapping, downloading, I saw opportunity where others might see obstacles. Can you search for people on this? I asked. Sure. Google, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. People put their whole lives online now. Their whole lives, including David's. The final months of my sentence became a crash course in modern technology. The prison had started a digital literacy program for soon-to-be-released inmates. I absorbed everything. Social media platforms, cloud storage, digital payment systems, cybersecurity basics. What fascinated me most was how much people shared voluntarily. Location check-ins, photos with timestamps, business connections, financial brags. You're picking this up fast, the instructor noted as I navigated between platforms. I have a lot of catching up to do. But I was thinking about David. 15 years of digital footprints. 15 years of posts, photos, connections he couldn't erase. The same technology that made me a dinosaur might also be his undoing. Jerry helped me understand the implications. Everything leaves a trace now, he explained. Delete a post. It's archived somewhere. Send a message. It's on a server. Your brother might have covered his tracks in 2009. But did he think about his digital trail since then? I started making lists, social media platforms to check, business databases to search, digital tools that didn't exist when David framed me, but might reveal his secrets now. Martinez brought printed screenshots when he could. David's LinkedIn showing his business growth. Facebook posts from company parties. Instagram photos of his luxury lifestyle. Each image tagged with dates, locations, and most importantly, connections to other people. Look at this, Martinez showed me one evening. A photo from David's company anniversary party. See the man in the background? That's Tommy Vega. Should I know him? He was Richard Hartman's biggest competitor. Wanted to buy Hartman's company for years. And here he is, toasting your brother's success 3 years after the murder. The web grew more complex. David hadn't just killed Richard and framed me. He'd used it to build relationships with Richard's enemies, possibly even selling them information from the stolen documents. The bearer bonds might have been just a bonus. The real value was in Richard's business secrets. I practiced on the prison computers during library time, learned about metadata in photos, cached web pages, digital forensics. The guards thought I was preparing for job searches. In a way, my job would be exposing David, and these tools would be my weapons. There's something else, Chen said. During our final orientation session, face recognition. Cameras everywhere now. Stores, streets, ATMs. The city has a network for crime prevention. Just so you know, you'll be tracked pretty much everywhere. Tracked. David would know the moment I was released, would watch my every move. But that worked both ways. His movements were recorded too, stored in databases that smart lawyers could subpoena. The smartphone's browser became my window into David's world. His company website boasted about security innovations, protecting clients from inside threats. The irony wasn't lost on me. Article after article showed his rise charity, galas, business awards, partnerships with law enforcement. But there were gaps. Careful examination showed David had scrubbed his early history. No photos from before 2010. No mentions of family, except vague references to overcoming tragedy. He'd tried to erase the past, not realizing that the absence of information was information itself. You're going to investigate him when you get out, Jerry said. It wasn't a question. I'm going to find evidence. Using all this, he gestured at the smartphone. Using everything, he's had 15 years to build his empire. But he's also had 15 years to make mistakes. Digital mistakes that weren't possible in 2009. The night before my release, I sat with the phone, creating accounts with careful thought. New email, generic name. Social media profiles that looked real, but revealed nothing. Digital camouflage for hunting in this new wilderness. David thought he was releasing a broken man into a world that had passed him by. He didn't realize he was releasing someone who'd spent months learning his new environment, studying his prey's habitat. The technology gap that should have been my disadvantage would become my weapon. Because while David had grown comfortable, confident in his digital fortress, I'd learned something crucial in prison. The most dangerous predator is the one that learns to hunt in new territory. Tomorrow, I'd walk out into David's world, but I'd be bringing skills he didn't expect, tools he didn't know I possessed. The smartphone in my hand wasn't just a device. It was a key to every secret my brother thought he'd buried. Time to start digging. The bus ticket in my pocket read one way, Riverside Station, but I wasn't going home. Not yet. First I needed to see them, to understand what 15 years had made of the family who'd thrown me away. The prison gates opened at 7 a.m. on a gray Thursday morning. I walked out carrying a single bag with legal papers, the smartphone, and $200 in gate money. The clothes felt strange. Jeans and a polo shirt bought from the commissary catalog. Styles that probably screamed former inmate to anyone who looked closely. They were waiting by a black SUV. My mother, aged beyond her years, silver hair, where Brown used to be. Lisa, holding car keys like a shield. And David, designer suit perfect, checking his phone with practiced nonchalance. Marcus, my mother said. Not son, not sweetheart. Just my name. Flat and cold. Hello, Mom. Well, you must have done something to end up there. The same words from my imagination made real. Delivered with the certainty of someone who'd repeated them for 15 years. Lisa nodded, unable to meet my eyes. The kids are at school. They don't know about ... this, about their uncle. About what you did, David interjected, finally looking up from his phone. He'd aged well. Success agreeing with him. Expensive watch. Manicured nails. The bearing of a man who'd never spent a night wondering if he'd wake up. We're here out of obligation, Marcus. To make sure you understand the situation. The situation: you're not welcome at family gatherings. You are not to contact Lisa's children. Mom doesn't want you at the house. He pulled out an envelope. There's a restraining order in here. If you come within 500 feet of my businesses, or my home, you'll go back to prison. I took the envelope, without opening it. Afraid of something. David, his jaw tightened. I'm protecting my family from a convicted murderer who spent 15 years obsessing over conspiracy theories. Get help, Marcus. Get a job. Build a life. But do it away from us. My mother stepped forward, and for a moment, I thought she might embrace me. Instead, she pressed something into my hand. A small cross on a chain. Find God, she said. Find forgiveness. Then maybe, ... maybe someday ... But she didn't finish. David's hand on her elbow guided her back to the SUV. Lisa followed without a word, without a backward glance. They drove away, leaving me standing outside the prison where I'd spent 15 years for David's crime. I walked to the bus stop, fingering the cross. It was the same one I'd given her for her 50th birthday, back when I was her successful son, her pride. Now it was a token of conditional love. Find God, admit guilt, and maybe earn forgiveness for crimes I didn't commit. The bus ride to town took 40 minutes through neighborhoods I didn't recognize. New developments where woods used to be. Strip malls replacing family businesses. Even the geography of home had changed while I was frozen in time. The motel was a chain off Highway 9. The kind that didn't ask questions if you paid cash. The desk clerk, a bored-looking kid who couldn't have been born when I went to prison, handed me a keycard without looking up from his phone. Room 247. Checkouts at 11. The room smelled like industrial cleaner and old smoke. I sat on the bed, spreading out the contents of David's envelope. The restraining order was comprehensive. His home, all 5 of his business locations. Lisa's house, my mother's house. Basically, anywhere the family might be, I was legally barred from approaching. But he'd made a mistake. The order listed all his properties, giving me a roadmap of his empire. 5 security consulting firms, a warehouse district office, 2 retail locations. The boy who'd begged me for rent money now owned half the city. I powered up the smartphone, using the motel's Wi-Fi to dive deeper into David's digital footprint. His company's website showed a timeline of growth that began 6 months after my conviction. The About Us section mentioned overcoming personal tragedy to build a security empire. My false imprisonment was literally part of his marketing. Social media revealed more. Photos from charity events where David posed with city officials, police brass, business leaders. He'd woven himself into the fabric of legitimate society, so thoroughly that attacking him would seem like attacking the community itself. But every photo told a story. Cross-referencing faces, I found patterns. The same group of early investors appeared repeatedly. Men who'd been Richard Hartman's rivals. A charity board that included Detective Morrison's wife. A security contract with the district attorney's office. My phone buzzed. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. Marcus Rivera, a woman's voice. Cautious. Yes. This is Sarah Chen from the Tribune. I've been following your case. I understand you were released today. The reporter Martinez had mentioned. The one who'd kept digging despite David's threats. I can't comment on. I'm not calling for a quote. I'm calling to warn you. Your brother has connections everywhere. He knows I've been investigating, and he's not happy. Be careful, Mr. Rivera. He's more dangerous than you know. Why do you care? A pause. Because I think you're innocent. And because David Rivera's security company did work for my family's restaurant years ago, right before their system was mysteriously corrupted during a robbery. Sound familiar? Chen's Garden. The corrupted footage. David hadn't just tampered with evidence in my case. He'd done it before. Probably after. Can we meet? I asked. Not yet. He's watching you. Give it a few days. Establish patterns. Make him comfortable. Then we'll talk. She paused. There's a coffee shop on 8th Street. Mariano's. I'm there every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Just so you know. The line went dead. I sat in the cheap motel room, processing the conversation. I wasn't alone in this. Someone else saw David for what he was, someone with resources and reach. That night, I lay on the uncomfortable mattress, planning my next moves. David expected me to either slink away in defeat or come at him directly. Violating the restraining order and landing back in prison. Didn't expect patience. He didn't expect me to use his own tools against him. The bus ticket was still in my pocket. One way to Riverside Station. Tomorrow, I'd start the journey home. Not to family. That home was gone forever. But to the truth buried under 15 years of lies. David had given me a roadmap with his restraining order. Sarah Chen had given me hope that someone would listen. And the smartphone in my hand gave me tools David couldn't have imagined. When he'd framed me, freedom felt nothing like I'd imagined. It was colder, lonelier, more dangerous. But it was also full of possibility. For the first time in 15 years, I could act instead of just react. Tomorrow, the hunt would begin. The screenshot saved on my phone showed David at a charity gala, dated December 2010. Just 14 months after my conviction. He was raising a champagne glass. Designer Tuxedo Perfect standing next to the mayor. The caption read, "Rising Entrepreneur. David Rivera pledges $50,000 to city youth programs." $50,000 from a man who'd been borrowing money for groceries 2 years earlier. I sat in the public library, using their computers to dig deeper than my phone allowed. The digital trail David had left was extensive, but patterns emerged if you knew where to look. Every charity donation, every business expansion, every new partnership, they all trace back to late 2009 and early 2010, the months immediately after Richard Hartman's murder. The library's genealogy section had old newspaper archives, some digitized, some still on my. I found David's first mention in the business section. Local security expert, launches consulting firm. The date, March 2010. The startup capital, private investors, who wish to remain anonymous. Anonymous investors, who invested anonymous money in a nobody security startup. Unless that nobody had something to offer, like bearer bonds, or information stolen from a murdered man's safe. My phone buzzed. A LinkedIn notification someone had viewed my profile. The generic one I'd created listed me as a financial consultant, with a 15-year gap explained as sabbatical for personal development. The viewer was from Rivera Security Solutions. David was keeping tabs. Good. Let him watch me use library computers to job hunt. Let him think I was the broken ex-con he expected. Meanwhile, I was building a digital map of his empire. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Instagram. David didn't have a personal account. Too careful for that. But his employees did. His business partners did. Their wives and girlfriends did. And they all loved posting photos. Amazing night at the Rivera Security Annual Party. Hashtag Best Boss Ever. Hashtag Rivera Family. Each tagged photo revealed connections. Cross-referencing faces with LinkedIn profiles, I identified key players in David's network. The CFO, who'd previously worked for one of Hartman's competitors. The head of operations, who'd been Detective Morrison's partner. The legal counsel who'd clerked for my trial judge. But it was a photo from 2011 that stopped me cold. A company retreat in Vegas. David centered among his early employees. In the background, partially visible, was a man I recognized. Vincent Caruso. I'd seen his mugshot in my case files. He'd been arrested 6 months before Hartman's murder for B&E. Charges mysteriously dropped. David knew a professional thief. Had known him since at least 2011. Possibly earlier. I started a new search, this time focusing on Caruso. His social media was sparse, but court records were public. Multiple arrests, few convictions. Always for sophisticated break-ins, where security systems failed to capture evidence. His specialty, according to one arrest report, was electronic circumvention of commercial security systems. The same type of system at Chen's Garden. The same type David had been trained to install and maintain. My hands shook as I screenshot everything, building an evidence folder on the cloud. Each piece alone meant nothing. Together they painted a picture. David had partnered with a professional thief who specialized in defeating security systems. Systems David understood intimately. "Sir, we're closing in 15 minutes. The librarian's voice startled me. I'd been researching for 6 hours. Outside, darkness had fallen. As I gathered my things, I noticed a man in the periodicals section who'd been there since I arrived, reading the same newspaper, watching without watching. David's man, or just my paranoia. In prison, paranoia kept you safe. Out here, it might do the same. I leapt through the main entrance, then doubled back through the children's section to exit via the side door. If someone was following, I'd lost them. The smartphone's GPS could track me, but only if I carried it. I powered it down, removed a battery, a trick Martinez had taught me. Back at the motel, I used the ancient desktop in their business center to continue researching. Vincent Caruso's last known address was in the warehouse district, the same area where David now had an office. Coincidence seemed less and less likely. Then I found it, buried in a lifestyle blog from 2012. A fluff piece about security entrepreneurs making cities safer. A photo of David at a conference, shaking hands with various officials. But in the mirror behind him, a reflection showed someone else. Caruso, wearing a Rivera security uniform. David had hired the thief, given him legitimate employment, hidden him in plain sight. I created multiple copies of everything, storing them in different cloud accounts, emailing encrypted files to addresses David wouldn't know. If something happened to me, the evidence would survive. Martinez had taught me that too. Always have a dead man switch. By 3 a.m. I'd constructed a timeline that made sense. David owes money to dangerous people, including Richard Hartman. David partners with Caruso to rob Hartman, planning to make it look like I did it. Caruso handles the break-in, while David ensures the security footage is corrupted. Something goes wrong. Hartman dies. David plants evidence, pointing to me. Manipulates witnesses with me in prison. David uses the stolen bonds to start his business. He brings in Hartman's enemies as investors, possibly selling them inside information. Caruso becomes an employee, his record cleaned by association with legitimate business. It was brilliant in its evil. David hadn't just framed me. He'd built an empire on the crime, surrounding himself with people who benefited from the lie. Everyone in his orbit had a stake in keeping me guilty. But digital footprints were forever. Every photo, every connection, every financial record added to the pattern. David could delete posts, scrub websites, threaten journalists. He couldn't erase the entire internet. My phone buzzed, powered on again for the walk back. A text from an unknown number. Stop digging, or go back to prison. So they were watching. Good. Let them see me return to the motel, presumably scared by their threat. Let them think I'd gotten the message. Because tomorrow, I'd visit Mariano's coffee shop. Tuesday, 3 p.m. Sarah Chen had been investigating longer than I had. Time to compare notes. I lay in bed, staring at David's charity gala photo on my phone. My brother, the philanthropist, the successful businessman, the man who'd murdered Richard Hartman and destroyed my life to cover it up. I'm coming. For you, I whispered to the image. With every tool you used against me, every connection you made, every digital breadcrumb you dropped, I'm going to use it all. The old Marcus would have confronted David directly, demanded answers, expected justice. Prison had killed that naive fool. What remained was someone who understood patience, who knew that the best revenge wasn't violence or even exposure. It was systematic dismantling of everything the enemy had built. David's empire existed in the digital age. Every transaction recorded, every relationship documented, every crime leaving electronic echoes. He'd adapted to this new world, used it to prosper. But I'd learned something in those long nights studying in my cell. The same technology that empowered criminals also exposed them. You just had to know where to look. And I was getting very good at looking. The newspaper clipping from Richard Hartman's obituary showed a grief-stricken woman in black. Her face turned away from cameras. Margaret Hartman had vanished from public life after the trial, selling their Westfield Heights mansion and moving to a modest neighborhood on the city's east side. It had taken me 3 days to find her, following property records and voter registrations through digital breadcrumbs. Mariano's coffee shop was warm and crowded. The perfect place for a clandestine meeting. Sarah Chen sat in the back corner, recognizable from her Tribune byline photo. She looked up as I approached, gesturing to the seat across from her. Mr. Rivera, you look better than your mugshot. 15 years of prison food will do that. Sat, ordering black coffee from the hovering waitress. You said David did work for your family's restaurant. 6 months before your case. We had a break-in, lost a week's receipts. The security footage was corrupted. Sound familiar? She pulled out a tablet. I've been tracking similar cases. 17 businesses between 2007 and 2009. All had David or his associates work on their security systems. All experienced failures during crimes. He was practicing or building a reputation. Each failure came with an upgrade recommendation. Very profitable. She swiped through documents. But here's what's interesting. The failures stopped. After October 2009. After Hartman. After he'd framed me. No need to take risks when he had $2 million in bearer bonds to launch his legitimate empire. You mentioned Margaret Hartman. I said, do you know where she is? Sarah studied me carefully. Why? She wrote to me once. In prison. Said Richard had mentioned someone who owed him money. Someone named David Rivera. Your brother owed Hartman money. According to her. I need to hear it directly. Need her to go on record. Sarah was quiet for a moment, weighing risks. She's fragile. The murder destroyed her. If you approach her wrong. I know what it's like to lose everything to violence. I said quietly. I won't hurt her more than necessary. She made her decision, writing an address on a napkin. She works at a flower shop now. Hartman's Blooms. She kept the name. Goes by Maggie instead of Margaret. And Marcus. She met my eyes. Be gentle. She's suffered enough. 2 days later, I stood outside Hartman's Blooms, watching through the window as Margaret, Maggie, arranged roses. She'd aged gracefully, silver threading through auburn hair, but her movements carried a sadness that time hadn't healed. The bell chimed as I entered. She looked up with a practiced smile that froze when she saw my face. No, she whispered. You're supposed to be in prison. Mrs. Hartman, I'm not here to hurt you. I just need to talk. Her hand moved toward the phone, probably to call 911. I stayed by the door, hands visible, trying to project harmlessness. Please, just 5 minutes. About David Rivera. Something in my voice, desperation maybe, or sincerity made her pause. You killed my husband. I didn't. And I think you know that. She was silent for a long moment. Then, coffee shop next door. Public place. 5 minutes. We sat at a small table, her hands wrapped around a mug she didn't drink from. I waited, letting her set the pace. Richard did mention your brother, she finally said. Several times in the weeks before. Before he died. David owed him money. Gambling debts, Richard said. He'd been patient, but David was getting desperate, making threats. What kind of threats? The kind that made Richard upgrade our security system. He said David knew things, had connections. Richard was going to cut him off, maybe go to the police. She looked up, eyes bright with unshed tears. The night he died, David had called the house. I answered. He said he needed to see Richard urgently, that he had the money. Richard left to meet him at the office, but David came to the house instead. She nodded. Richard must have come home early, caught him there. Your brother knew the security codes, Richard. Had given them to him months earlier, when David claimed someone was threatening him. Stupid, trusting Richard. My hands shook. Here was confirmation of what I'd suspected. David had used Richard's kindness against him, gained access to the house, then killed him when the robbery went wrong. Why didn't you tell the police? I did. Her voice cracked. I told Detective Morrison everything. He said David had an alibi, that you were the obvious suspect with your access and knowledge. He said I was confused, grieving, misremembering things. Then your brother visited. She pulled back as if burned. A week after the funeral, so sympathetic, so sorry about his brother's crimes. He mentioned how hard it must be, a widow alone, how dangerous the city could be, how important it was to have the right memories of that night. Her laugh was bitter. I got the message. David had threatened her, subtly, carefully, but she'd understood. Testify about his connection to Richard, and join her husband. Would you be willing to make a statement now? I asked. On the record. She was quiet for so long I thought she'd refuse. Then, I'm 73 years old. I have cancer, slow growing, but cancer nonetheless. What's he going to do? Kill me faster? She met my eyes. Yes, Mr. Rivera, I'll make a statement. Richard deserves that much. I wanted to cry. After 15 years, someone was willing to speak the truth. There's something else, she said, reaching into her purse. I kept this, though I don't know why. She pulled out a small key. Richard had a safety deposit box, even I didn't know about until I was settling the estate. Bank of Commerce, box 472. It's been paid up for 20 years in advance. I never opened it. Couldn't bear to. But maybe there's something that could help. She pressed the key into my hand. Find out who killed my husband, Mr. Rivera. Not for your sake, but for his. He was a good man who trusted the wrong people. I will, I promised. And Margaret, thank you. Don't thank me yet. Your brother has gotten very powerful. Be careful. As I left the coffee shop, I felt the weight of the key in my pocket. A safety deposit box Richard had kept secret. What had he hidden there? Evidence of David's debts. Records that could prove my innocence. That night, I met Sarah Chen again. She go on record, I told her, and there's more. I showed her the key. Sarah's eyes widened. This could be huge, but banks require identification, paperwork. You can't just walk in with a key. Then we need to do this legally. File motions, get court orders. That'll take time. And alert David. I thought of Margaret's courage, her willingness to risk David's retaliation for the truth. Then we'd better move fast. He's already threatened one widow. I won't let him hurt another. Sarah nodded, already planning. I'll file freedom of information requests. Get my editor involved. Make it public enough that David can't act without scrutiny. We were building momentum. Margaret's testimony, the safety deposit box, the digital evidence I'd gathered. Each piece strengthened the case against David. But I knew my brother. Cornered animals were the most dangerous, and David had killed once to protect his secrets. He'd kill again, if necessary. The key felt heavy in my pocket as I walked back to the motel. Somewhere in box 472 might be the evidence that could free me, completely destroy David's empire, and give Richard Hartman justice. I just had to live long enough to use it. The family photo on Lisa's Facebook page showed them all at Riverside Park, the same spot where we'd celebrated birthdays when we were kids. Annual Rivera Family BBQ. The caption read, with dozens of likes and heart emojis. My mother sent it, between David and Lisa, grandchildren playing in the background. Everyone smiling as if they hadn't erased a son, a brother, an uncle, from existence. I sat in my rental car across the street, watching them through the trees. The restraining order said 500 feet. I was at 501, measured carefully. Close enough to see, but not to violate the law that would send me back to prison. David worked the grill. The patriarch now, wearing an apron that said world's best uncle. He'd taken all my roles, filled every space I'd left. Lisa's kids called him Uncle D, brought him sodas, laughed at his jokes. The son I'd never have. The family I'd lost. All orbiting around the man who'd destroyed my life. But something was different. David's movements were sharp, agitated. He kept checking his phone, scanning the park perimeter. Lisa noticed too, placing a hand on his arm, asking something that made him shake his head and force a smile. He knew about Margaret Hartman. Sarah's article had run that morning. New questions in 2009 murder case. Widow breaks silence. Not front page, but prominent enough. Margaret's revelation that David had owed Richard money, had access to the house, had visited her with veiled threats. It was all there in black and white dot. My phone buzzed. Sarah. Response from bank. Need court order for safety deposit box. Filed motion this morning. David's lawyer already objecting. So he knew about that too. The race was on now. Could we get legal access before David found a way to destroy whatever Richard had hidden? A child's laughter drew my attention back to the gathering. Lisa's daughter, maybe 7, chasing a butterfly near the playground. She had our mother's eyes. Lisa's smile. A niece I'd never meet, who'd grow up believing her uncle was a monster. Sophia. Stay where we can see you. Lisa called. And the name hit me like a punch. Sophia was our grandmother's name, the one who'd taught us that family meant everything. That blood-protected blood dot. How disappointed she'd be to see us now. David had moved away from the grill. Phone pressed to his ear, gesturing angrily. Through the trees, I could read his body. Language-controlled fury. The same stance he'd had when creditors called in the old days. Someone was delivering bad news. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered. You're watching us. David's voice, cold and flat. I said nothing. I can see your car, Marcus. Silver Camry, rental plates. You're in violation of the restraining order. I'm 501 feet away. I measured. Always so precise. So careful with details. That's why you were a good financial advisor. It's also why you were a terrible criminal. I wasn't a criminal at all. The jury disagreed. A pause. What do you want? Money. Is that what this is about? I want the truth. The truth. His laugh was bitter. The truth is that you destroyed our family. Mom cries every Sunday at church. Lisa's in therapy. Her kids have to use a different last name at school because of what you did. What you did, David. What you did to Richard Hartman, to me, to all of us. Still spinning fantasies. 15 years wasn't enough to teach you. His voice hardened. That old woman is confused, grieving. No one believes her rambling, and whatever you think is in that safety deposit box, you'll never get to it. We'll see. No, you'll see. You'll see what happens when you don't take the gift I gave you. Freedom, Marcus. I could have made sure you died in prison, that attack. I could have hired better men, but you're my brother. I gave you a chance to disappear, start over somewhere else. After stealing 15 years of my life, the price of your stupidity. You think you were so smart, but I knew about your passwords, your schedule, your clients. You talked about Richard's wealth all the time, how unfair it was that old money sat in safes while young talent struggled. Don't you remember? Those drunken rants about redistribution of wealth? I hadn't ranted. I'd mentioned, once, that trickle-down economics was flawed. David had twisted every memory, every conversation, building a narrative where I was the envious killer. I remember you owing everyone money, I said, including Richard. I remember you begging me for loans I couldn't give. And I remember you saying family should help family. But when I needed you, where were you? Too proud, too principled. Well, principles don't pay debts to the kind of people I owed. There it was, the closest he'd come to admitting the truth. He'd owed dangerous people money, and when I wouldn't help, he'd found another way. My life for his debts. Enjoy the barbecue, David. Enjoy my life, my family, my freedom. But know this, I'm not disappearing. I'm not running. I'm going to prove what you did. From 501 feet away. He laughed again. You can't even get close enough to smell the burgers. But please, keep trying. Every desperate move you make just proves how guilty you are. The bitter ex-con, harassing his successful brother. It's pathetic. He hung up. I watched him return to the grill, sliding the phone into his pocket, mask of congeniality back in place, but his hands shook as he flipped burgers. He was scared, and scared David was dangerous David. A car pulled up beside mine. Sarah Chen, looking grim. We have a problem, she said. The judge assigned to our motion for the safety deposit box. Judge Harrison, his son works for Rivera Security, of course. David's web of connections, paying off again. So we request a different judge. Already did. But it'll delay things. And Marcus, ... She hesitated. There was a fire at the flower shop last night. After hours, no one hurt. But Margaret's scared. My hands clenched. David's escalation, warning Margaret to stay quiet. Is she safe? I've got her in a hotel, interviewing her on camera, getting everything on record before. She didn't finish, but I understood. Before David silenced her permanently. Across the park, the family gathering continued. My mother cutting cake, Lisa taking photos, children playing. The perfect American family, minus the son, and brother rotting in prison for 15 years. He won't win, I said quietly. He's had 15 years to build this lie. But lies are fragile. One crack, and it all falls apart. Sarah nodded. The article's getting attention. Other victims' families are reaching out, wondering if their cases involved corrupted security footage. David might have framed you, but you weren't his only victim. I looked one last time at the family I'd lost. David stood with his arm around our mother, playing the dutiful son. But even from 501 feet, I could see the tension in his shoulders. The way he kept scanning for threats could let him feel hunted. Let him know what it was like to have your life under siege. Let's go, I told Sarah. We have work to do. As we drove away, I didn't look back. That family in the park was a stranger's family now. My real purpose was justice for Richard, for Margaret, for myself, and for all the others David had hurt in his climb to success. The gathering would end. They'd go home to their comfortable lives built on my bones. But their comfort was ending. The truth was coming. And this time, David couldn't frame anyone else for it. The flash drive weighed nothing but contained everything. 15 years of evidence, compressed into 32 gigabytes financial records, photographs, witness statements, digital trails. Sarah and I had worked 3 straight days compiling it all, after Judge Harrison mysteriously recused himself from our case. Replaced by Judge Patricia Stevenson, who'd shown interest in wrongful convictions before. Tomorrow, we'd get access to the safety deposit box. Tonight, I had one last task. The text from Lisa had been unexpected. Family dinner Sunday, 6 p.m. Mom's house. Please come. We need to talk. It violated the restraining order for me to accept. But the follow-up message clarified. David won't be there, he's out of town on business. Mom wants to see you. A trap, maybe. But Margaret Hartman's video testimony was already safely in Sarah's hands. The evidence was backed up in multiple locations. If something happened to me now, the truth would still come out. I parked down the street from my childhood home. The same maple tree in the yard, now towering over the roof. The porch light was on. Mom always left it on, even when no one was expected. Old habits. Lisa answered the door, looking older than her 38 years. Marcus. Just my name, but softer than at the prison. Lisa. Mom's in the kitchen. She read the article. About Mrs. Hartman. The house smelled the same lavender and coffee. Mom's permanent perfume. Family photos lined the hallway, but I'd been edited out. Where my high school graduation photo once hung, there was David's college diploma. My childhood had been erased and replaced. Mom sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a tea mug. She looked up when I entered, and for a moment, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Doubt. Hope. It vanished quickly. Sit, she said, not a request. I sat in my old chair, muscle memory placing me at the family table, like the last 15 years hadn't happened. Margaret Hartman is a grieving woman, Mom began. She's confused, looking for someone else to blame. She's telling the truth. Your truth. The truth that makes you innocent and David guilty. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled. Do you know what you're doing to this family? Again. What David did, Mom. What David is still doing. Lisa spoke from the doorway. He's been acting strange. Since the article, he's been different, paranoid. He hired security for his house. Says you're stalking him. I've stayed away. The restraining order. He says you have hackers. That you're destroying his business. Lisa sat across from me. 3 clients canceled contracts this week. They cited concerns about company integrity. Could David's empire was built on trust. Shatter that trust, and the empire crumbles. He did it, I said simply. He killed Richard Hartman and framed me for it. I have proof. Mom's cup clattered against the saucer. Stop. Just stop. My sons don't kill people. One of your sons spent 15 years in prison for murder. Either I did it, or David did. There's no third option, Mom. The silence stretched until it became a living thing, filling the kitchen with years of unspoken doubts. Show me, Lisa whispered. Show me your proof. I pulled out the flash drive, but Mom's hand shot out, covering it. Double quotes. No, I don't want to see. I can't. Her voice broke. I can't lose another son. You already lost one. You threw me away the moment the verdict was read. You were guilty. The jury said. The jury was wrong. David made sure of that. I pulled out my phone, showing her the photo of David with Vincent Caruso. This man is a professional thief. David hired him. They robbed Richard together. Mom pushed the phone away. I don't know that person. But you know David owed money. You know he was desperate before my arrest, and flush with cash after. You know, Mom, deep down, you've always known. Marcus. Lisa's voice was strange. The night you were arrested, David called me before you called. Before the news broke, he told me you'd done something terrible, that I should prepare Mom. My heart raced. Another crack in David's story. What time? Maybe last 10:30. I remember because I was watching the news. 10:30. The murder had just happened. No one should have known yet. He knew because he was there. The kitchen door burst open. David stood in the doorway, car keys in hand, face twisted with fury. Out of town. I looked at Lisa, who shrank back. I'm sorry, she whispered. He said you were dangerous. Said we needed protection. Of course. The concerned brother, protecting his family from the dangerous ex-con. And I'd walked right into it. You're in violation of the restraining order, David said, phone already in hand. I'm calling the police. Call them? I stood, pulling out the flash drive. Let's tell them everything. About Caruso. About the warehouse you bought with blood money. About threatening Margaret Hartman. His finger hesitated over the phone. Or we can talk. Brother to brother. End this. There's nothing to end. You're a convicted murderer who can't accept responsibility. Then why are you sweating? He was, despite the cool evening. Sweat beaded on his forehead. The mask of calm cracking. You want to know what really happened? David's voice dropped, became something cruel. You want the truth. Fine. Richard was an arrogant old man who thought he could destroy people's lives over money. Natural selection. Marcus was weak. You were weak. I survived. David, Mom's gasp cut through the kitchen. But he was beyond stopping now. 15 years of pretense finally breaking. You could have helped me. Family helps family. Isn't that what Grandma taught us? But you chose your principles over blood. So I chose survival over yours. You're confessing, Lisa breathed. Oh my God, you're actually confessing. David's laugh was ugly. Confessing. I'm explaining reality to a delusional ex-con. No one's recording. No witnesses that matter. I smiled then, the expression feeling foreign after years of prison. Actually, ... I pulled back my shirt collar, revealing the wire Sarah had helped me place. Everything's being recorded. And broadcast. Live streaming, I think they call it. The color drained from David's face as I continued. Amazing technology these days. Sarah Chen's watching from her van, along with 2 police detectives who've been investigating the Hartman case. You're lying. Am I? Check your phone. Check the Rivera security social media. See what your clients are watching right now. His hands shook as he pulled out his phone. I didn't need to see the screen to know what he found. His confession, streaming live, already being shared and reshared. The digital age he'd used so well had turned on him. You set me up, he said, voice hollow. No, David. I gave you exactly what you gave me. The truth, witnessed and recorded. The difference is, my truth leads to justice. Yours led to prison. The sirens were audible now, growing closer. Mom sobbed quietly while Lisa stood frozen, watching her worldview shatter. David looked between us, calculating. But there was nowhere to run. His empire, his reputation, his freedom, all destroyed by his own words. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. I'm sorry it came to this. But you left me no choice. The police entered with Sarah and Detective Morrison. Yes, the same Morrison, who'd been quietly investigated after the warehouse fire and wanted to make things right. David didn't resist as they cuffed him, didn't speak as they read his rights. He just stared at me with eyes that finally showed the truth he'd lost. As they led him away, Mom reached for my hand. Marcus, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just believe me now. The flash drive sat on the table between us, no longer needed. David had given us something better, a full confession, witnessed by family, recorded for the world. 15 years late, but finally, justice. The new police report was thicker than a phone book. David's arrest had opened floodgates, employees coming forward, clients reporting suspicious incidents, investigators connecting dots that spanned 15 years. Vincent Caruso, arrested, the same night, had flipped immediately, providing detailed accounts of 7 robberies he'd committed with David before the Hartman murder. I sat in the district attorney's office, the same building where I'd been prosecuted 15 years ago. Different room, different circumstances, but the same weight of justice hanging in the air. Mr. Rivera, Ada Catherine Palmer said, sliding documents across the desk. The state of New York formally apologizes for the wrongful conviction. This exoneration includes full expungement of your record and qualification for compensation. Compensation. As if money could buy back 15 years. What about David, charged with murder in the first degree, conspiracy, evidence tampering, witness intimidation, and 16 counts of fraud related to his business practices? She paused. He's looking at life without parole. The same sentence I'd faced. Poetic justice, or just justice delayed. There's more, Palmer continued. The safety deposit box. Judge Stevenson granted immediate access after your brother's arrest. Would you like to know what was inside? I'd waited 15 years. Yes, she opened. Another file. Documentation of loans Richard Hartman made to various individuals, including your brother. David owed $200,000. Due the week Richard died. There were also recordings. Apparently, Mr. Hartman recorded threatening phone calls he received. Your brother's voice is clearly identifiable. Proof Richard had hidden away, maybe planning to go to police, not knowing David would strike first. The families of other victims want to meet with you, Palmer added. The Chuns, the Washingtons, others who lost money when their security systems mysteriously failed. You've become something of a symbol. A symbol, the wrongly convicted man who fought back. But I didn't feel symbolic. I felt tired. Outside the DA's office, Mom waited on a bench. She'd aged years, in the weeks since David's arrest, the weight of misplaced faith crushing her shoulders. How do I apologize for 15 years? She asked without preamble. You don't. You can't. We just ... move forward. I threw you away. Tears tracked down her cheeks. My own son. I chose the lie over you. You chose the story that made sense. David made sure of that. Don't. Her voice turned fierce. Don't. Forgive me so easily. I need to earn it. Need to prove I deserve a second chance. Maybe she was right. Maybe easy forgiveness was just another form of injustice. Lisa had filed for divorce from her husband, unable to trust her judgment anymore. If I could be so wrong about David, what else am I wrong about? She'd asked. Her kids still didn't know their Uncle Marcus existed. That revelation would come slowly, carefully. The media circus was intense. Every outlet wanted the exclusive, the inside story of brother betraying brother. Sarah Chen got it, of course. Her investigation had made this possible. The resulting series won a Pulitzer, bringing attention to wrongful convictions nationwide. But the hardest visit was to Margaret Hartman. He confessed, I told her, sitting in her flower shop among the blooms. David admitted to killing Richard. She nodded slowly. I watched the stream, watched him finally tell the truth. A pause. It doesn't bring Richard back. No, nothing can. But you got your life back. That matters. She touched my hand gently. Richard would have been glad. He always said you were a good man, just young. He'd have been horrified to know his death destroyed your life too. Rivera Security Solutions folded within a month. Clients fled. Employees scattered. The building David had bought with blood money, standing empty. The FBI found evidence of money laundering, tax evasion. A web of crime that made the murder seem almost quaint by comparison. Caruso's testimony revealed the full scope. David was smart, he'd told investigators. Never got his hands dirty after Hartman. Let others take the risks, while he played legitimate businessman. But Hartman was personal. He had to be there. Had to see the old man's face when he realized who'd betrayed him. That detail haunted me. Richard's last moments, recognizing David, understanding the betrayal. At least he died knowing I wasn't responsible. Cold comfort, but comfort nonetheless. The compensation hearing was set for next month. Lawyers calculated lost wages, pain and suffering, the price of 15 stolen years. But how do you quantify missing your mother's 70th birthday, your sister's wedding, the chance to have a family of your own? 10 million, my lawyer suggested. Minimum. The state will settle rather than risk a jury trial. $10 million. I'd have traded it all for one day of freedom 15 years ago. David refused to see me at Rikers. 3 requests, 3 denials. Part of me was relieved. What was there to say? He'd stolen 15 years. Now the state would steal the rest of his. The symmetry was perfect and terrible. Martinez visited on a cold Tuesday. Badge retired but spirit intact. Heard you're starting a non-profit. Help for the wrongly convicted. Someone helped me. Time to pay it forward. He smiled. Jerry would be proud. Speaking of which, ... double quotes, he handed me a letter. Jerry had been released 6 months ago, his case reopened, based on our work together. He was living in Florida now, teaching paralegal courses at a community college. Marcus, the letter read, saw the news. Always knew you'd beat it. The system's broken, but sometimes broken people can fix broken things. Don't let freedom make you soft. Stay dangerous. Jerry, stay dangerous. Good advice for someone rebuilding a life from ashes. The doorbell at my new apartment, small but mine, revealed an unexpected visitor. Detective Morrison, looking older, grayer, humbled. I owe you an apology, he said without preamble. I let David manipulate me. Took his word, his evidence, didn't dig deeper. I failed you and failed Richard Hartman. You're here now. I testified at David's trial. Told them everything, how he influenced the investigation, suggested leads, helped shape witness statements. It won't give you back 15 years, but maybe it helps balance the scales. Maybe it did. Morrison had been another victim of David's manipulation, seeing what he was meant to see. At least he had the courage to admit it. The trial date was set for spring. David had hired the best lawyers money could buy, but money was running out. Frozen assets, seized accounts, the empire crumbling. His lawyers were already floating plea deals. 25 to life, instead of life without parole. No deals, I told Palmer. He serves what I would have served. Mom moved to a smaller house, unable to bear the memories in our childhood home. She volunteered now at a prison ministry, working with families of the incarcerated. I failed one son, she said. Maybe I can help other mothers not make my mistakes. Lisa brought her kids to meet me on a Saturday afternoon. 7 and 9, curious about the uncle who'd appeared from nowhere. Mom says you were away. The oldest, Sophia, Said, were you exploring? In a way. Did you find treasure? I thought about it. I found truth. Sometimes that's better than treasure. She seemed satisfied with that, returning to her coloring. Small steps toward normalcy, toward family, toward forgetting that Uncle Marcus had been erased for their entire lives. The settlement negotiations began in winter. The state, embarrassed by the publicity, wanted it resolved quickly. My legal team pushed hard, citing not just the wrongful conviction, but the systemic failures that enabled it. 15 million, they offered finally. Plus healthcare for life and job placement assistance. I took it, not for the money, but for the acknowledgement. The state admitting, officially, that they'd stolen 15 years of an innocent man's life. The Marcus Rivera Foundation launched a month later, offering legal assistance to inmates claiming actual innocence. Sarah Chen joined the board, bringing media connections and investigative resources. Martinez consulted on prison conditions and guard relations. Even Jerry flew up for the opening. You're really doing this, Mom said at the launch event. Taking something horrible and making it meaningful. David took my life and built an empire of lies. I'm taking it back and building something true. The first case we took was Tommy Chen from Rockbridge, the bank fraud conviction with the tampered evidence. Within 6 months, he was free. Another victim of prosecutorial overreach corrected. But the real victory came in a letter from David. Not to me, he still refused contact, but to Mum, intercepted by his lawyers and shared with the court. I'm sorry, he'd written. Not for what I did to Marcus. He was weak, would have wasted his life anyway. But for disappointing you, for not being the son you thought I was. That's my only regret. Even in apology, he couldn't admit the full truth. Couldn't see me as anything but the weakling who'd refused to help him. Prison wouldn't rehabilitate David any more than it had rehabilitated me. It would just contain him, keep him from destroying other lives. The nonprofit grew. More cases, more exonerations, more families reunited. Each victory felt like reclaiming a piece of what David had stolen, not just from me, but from justice itself. 1 year after my release, I stood in Richard Hartman's flower shop. Margaret had made me a partner, saying Richard would have wanted it. Surrounded by life and color and the scent of growing things, I felt something I hadn't experienced in 16 years. Peace. David was serving life without parole, his empire dismantled, his crimes exposed. Mom was learning to live with the truth about both her sons. Lisa was rebuilding, her children knowing their real uncle. The system that had failed me was being forced to change, one case at a time. It wasn't the life I'd planned at 30, wasn't the success I'd imagined. But it was real, built on truth instead of lies, justice instead of revenge. And that was enough. The keys to my new apartment weren't just metal and teeth. They were a symbol of everything I'd fought to reclaim. 6 months after David's conviction, I stood in the doorway of a place that was truly mine. Not a motel room or a halfway house, but a home chosen and paid for with money that carried no blood on it. It's perfect, Sarah said, setting down a box of legal files. The Marcus Rivera Foundation had grown enough to need real office space, but I still worked from home most days. Reviewing cases, writing briefs, connecting with inmates who swore their innocence. 80% were guilty. That was the hard truth I'd learned. But 20%, 1 in 5, had stories worth investigating. Stories like mine. The Chen family sent another donation. Sarah continued, pulling out her tablet. And 60 Minutes wants a follow-up segment. 1 year later, where are you now? Where was I now? Free. But freedom was more complicated than I'd imagined in my cell. Some days, I still woke at 4 a.m. for count, still hoarded food in my apartment, still felt my chest tighten when I heard sirens. Tell them I'm busy, I said. We have real work to do. The real work was Michael Patterson, serving year 3 of a 20-year sentence for a murder his brother-in-law had committed. The parallels to my case were eerie family betrayal, manipulated evidence, a relative who'd profited from the conviction. We'd gotten the case reopened, new DNA testing ordered. In a month, Michael would probably walk free. My phone buzzed. Mom, texting like a teenager now, that Lisa had taught her. Dinner Sunday. I'm making your favorite. She didn't know my favorite anymore. 15 years of prison food had changed my palate, my preferences, my entire relationship with the outside world. But she was trying, and that mattered. I'll be there, I typed back. The apartment was sparse but comfortable. A bed that wasn't bolted to the floor. A kitchen where I could cook whenever I wanted. Windows without bars. Simple freedoms that felt miraculous. On the wall, I'd hung a single photo. Not of family or friends, but of Richard Hartman. A reminder of why I did this work. Of the man whose death had destroyed my life, but whose hidden evidence had ultimately saved it. Marcus. A knock at the door revealed an unexpected visitor. Lisa's daughter Sophia, now 8, holding a school project. "Mom said you could help," she said, marching in with the confidence of a child who'd never known real fear. "It's about the justice system. I'm supposed to interview someone who knows about courts and stuff." I helped her settle at my kitchen table. The same kind of metal surface I'd eaten at for 15 years, but transformed by the simple fact that I'd chosen it. "What do you want to know?" "My teacher says the system is good, but sometimes makes mistakes." "Is that true?" From the mouths of babes. "Yes, sometimes big mistakes, but there are people working to fix them. Like you, like me," she wrote carefully in her notebook, tongue poking out in concentration. "Mom says Uncle David was a bad man who hurt people. But he was your brother. Doesn't that make you sad?" The question I'd avoided for months, delivered by an H who deserved honesty. "Very sad. But sometimes people we love do terrible things. That doesn't mean we stop loving who they used to be. We just have to accept who they became." She nodded solemnly, writing more notes. "My friend Emma says her dad is in jail. She says he didn't do it. Could you help him? I can look into it. What's his name?" And just like that, another case. Another family hoping for justice. Another chance to balance the scales. The interview continued. Sophia asking questions that cut deeper than any journalist's. Why did people lie? How did I stay hopeful in prison? What was the first thing I ate when I got out? "A burger," I told her, though I'd thrown it up. My system unable to handle the richness after years of prison food. "One more question," she said finally. "Are you happy now?" I considered it. Happy seemed too simple a word. I was free. I was purposeful. I was slowly rebuilding connections to a family that had betrayed me. I was helping others find the justice I'd fought so hard to achieve. "I'm working on it," I told her. "Every day, I'm working on it." She seemed satisfied with that answer, packing up her project. "Mom's waiting in the car. She says you can come for dinner if you want. Tell her I'll think about it." After she left, I stood at my window, looking out at the city that had continued without me for 15 years. Somewhere in Rikers, David was learning what I'd learned. That time moved differently in a cage. That freedom was a memory that faded a little more each day. I didn't hate him anymore. Hate required energy I needed for other things. But I didn't forgive him either. Some wounds went too deep for forgiveness. All you could do was learn to work around them, build a life despite the damage. My laptop chimed with new emails. 3 more requests for help. 2 donation offers. 1 message from Jerry in Florida, a photo of him teaching, smiling, free. This was my new beginning. Not the life I'd planned at 30, full of financial success and traditional milestones, but a life with meaning, with purpose born from pain. Every person we freed was a victory against the system that had failed me. Every family reunited was proof that truth could prevail, even if it took 15 years. I made coffee, good coffee, chosen freely, and got to work. Somewhere, another Marcus Rivera was sitting in a cell, swearing innocence to deaf ears. Somewhere, another family was fracturing under the weight of lies. But also, somewhere, truth was waiting to be discovered. Justice was possible. Freedom could be reclaimed. And I would keep fighting until every innocent person had their chance. At a new beginning, the keys to my apartment caught the afternoon sun, glinting with possibility. They were just metal and teeth. But they opened more than a door. They opened a future where Marcus Rivera wasn't just a wrongly convicted man or a symbol of injustice. I was simply a man who'd survived the worst betrayal imaginable and chosen to transform that pain into purpose. If you've ever been betrayed by those who should have believed in you, if you've ever fought for truth against overwhelming odds, if you've ever had to rebuild your entire life from nothing, then you understand. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't destruction. It's resurrection. Sometimes the best way to honor what was taken is to give others what you lost. Sometimes, a new beginning is the most powerful ending of all.